Hey, we're going to talk about making markers today. So I'm going to use our legging from our 2403 assignment to demonstrate how to create a marker. So once our pattern is fully graded and we've checked our specs and we are fully good to go, and please note for this assignment we're just practicing marker making, but for your future projects you will need to make sure that you have seam allowance and notches and everything appropriately labeled, pieces named correctly for each of your assignments. Okay, so once you have your model, you're going to save it and you're going to close it. Okay, please don't leave it open because we're going to edit it in Model Editor. And once you've edited it in Model Editor, if you still have it open in PDS and maybe something wasn't saved, it's going to overwrite something. All right, so here's our model 2403. So the first thing I'm going to do is open this with Model Editor. Okay, we reviewed Model Editor briefly last semester, so this will be hopefully a review for most of you. Okay, so once you have your Model Editor open, this is what Model Editor looks like. You're going to scroll down to your pieces down here, okay? And you should see all of your pieces that you saved into your model with your piece names here. And an image. If you don't see an image next to one of your pieces, there's probably an issue with your pieces saving. Maybe you edited your piece or edited your piece name and you didn't add it back into your model. So if that's the case, you should go back to PDS, open your model, and make sure you have all the correct pieces saved, okay? The next column is category. So category, the only specific thing about category that you need to remember is that the category has to be unique for every single piece in a particular fabric code, okay? So for example, if I am doing a jacket and I have a front facing in fabric A, which is self, and I have a front facing in fabric B, which is interfacing or lining, those can have the same category names. They could both be called front facing because they have different fabrics assigned. But otherwise, you should pretty much follow the rule of the categories need to be unique. So typically what I like to do is use the letter code in my piece name. So this one would be back, this would be back waistband, this would be front, this would be front waistband. You're almost always going to have to update your categories unless you're making a new model off of an existing model that has the same types of pieces. A lot of times, like for example, if we created these waistbands just from a rectangle, the category is just going to be rectangle, or it may have a category from whatever you brought the pieces in from. Okay, the description, I like to kind of let myself know what these pieces are for. So cut, I use cut as kind of a default for anything that I know I want to send to the marker and actually cut. If you're working on a style where you have maybe a block piece or a measure piece, so for example, like in denim, often we have a measure piece that has measure lines on it that are graded, and then we break out all of our pieces. It makes it easier to measure our graded pattern without having to measure a bunch of pieces that may be only part of the measurement spec. So for those, I would enter like block or measure piece or something like that. And that just indicates to me that I actually don't want to cut any of them, okay? But I want to keep them in my model. Okay, so these all say cut. The next thing we need to do is enter the fabric. So each of these fabrics is not one fabric per style. This is like color. Think of this as like colorways, where maybe fabric 1 is like a cotton print. Maybe fabric 2 is a cotton solid. Maybe fabric 3 is a cotton spandex blend, right? So maybe you're cutting this legging in 4 different fabrics. But inside the fabric column, you put your fabric code. Your fabric code is indicated up here, okay? So for example, this particular pattern only needs 1 fabric. So it's going to be A for every single piece, okay? If I had like a combo fabric, or let's say maybe I had an inside waistband that was going to be in a mesh fabric or something like that, I would have a separate piece for that and I would label it B, okay? So once you add more letters here, you get new fabric codes up here, okay? And you can change these material categories and material names for your own reference, but just know that whenever you add a new fabric in here, it will register up here, okay? So this would be like A is self, B is lining maybe, C is interfacing, right? That's how we use the ABCs. But then for each fabric, we would have the same indications. So if this was just a different fabrication, I'm still going to be AAA because these are all still in the self. It's just that my self has changed, okay? So for today, we're just going to fill out fabric 1 with A's, get rid of my B because I don't actually have that. The next thing we worry about is flips. So this flip section tells me how many pieces I want to actually cut and how I want them oriented around the X and Y axis. Okay, so for my pants, so imagine you have fabric you're cutting at home. Oftentimes, if you were cutting a pant leg, you would fold the fabric in half lengthwise, right? Along the grain, you'd fold it and then you'd cut two pant pieces. And then when you took the paper off, you would flip one of those pieces, right? So now you have 2 back pieces, but they're symmetrical. The face is, if you put them both face side up, they're facing each other, okay? So that is essentially what we're doing with our flips. So we have to think about the XY axis and imagine flipping this piece in the direction we want to flip. So for example, and it always has to do with how the piece is oriented on your screen, okay? So imagine this back piece. I know I want to flip it so that the other piece has the rise and the inseam facing this one, right? So I want to flip it over the x-axis. Does that make sense? So in this first dash column, this is that I want 1 as it is right now. And then I can enter another one in the X, flip X, right? Because I just determined I want to flip this over the X axis to get my second back piece, okay? In some cases, you'll want to flip over your Y axis, and in some cases, you'll want to flip over your X axis. So you need to kind of imagine how you want those pieces to come out after they're cut, and that's how you can determine how you're going to do this. So our waistbands are folded pieces, so I just need 1 of those. But note, if I needed multiples, you don't have to enter flips for pieces that are already symmetrical. You can just enter how many you want here. Okay, so if this was like a pocket and I had multiple pockets, I could just enter 2, 4, however many I wanted, okay? But I just need 1 back waistband. And then for my front, I need to do the same as my back with a flip over the x-axis. And then for my front waistband, I just need 1 again. Also note that mirrored pieces, so if I had like a front shirt and the center front was mirrored, you also don't have to flip those because they will come out opened, unmirrored. So for those, you would just keep it as 1 in the dash column, okay? All right, so once I have all of this figured out, I am going to save my model editor and I'm going to close it, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do to create a marker, I have to first create an order because I have to tell the marker how many of each size I want and how wide my fabric is and things like that. So in the model editor, all I'm doing is I'm specifying how many pieces and in what orientation I have in that particular model, not necessarily how many I'm cutting today, okay? So if I go to process, we're going to move into, so far we've dabbled in the pattern design submenu. Today we're going to move into the order and marking submenu. So we're going to use easy marking in this class, but we have to do an easy order first, okay? So with this model highlighted, I'm going to choose this application, easy order. So I get an application open that looks like this. There's not very many things to do within this application. Because again, this is essentially like putting in your cut order with a cut room to say, this is the model I want, this is the width of my fabric, and these are my size range, and this is how many I want, okay? So if you had your model highlighted when you clicked easy order, when the easy order opens, you'll see over here in step 1, select models, that your model is already there. You can do multiples at a time, essentially creating a batch order for multiple markers. So you could add models if you wanted to. If you got into easy order with no marker selected here, just go to add model and it will take you to your folder on the Z drive. And you'll find your model and choose open, okay? The other thing I want to make sure you do first is make sure you put your marker prefix in here. It often will open with whatever marker you made last. It's not, I don't know why it's not intuitive. I wish it would just come in with the name of your model, but alas, it doesn't. So go ahead and name this. You're going to name it exactly as your model is named. And then we're going to move down to step 2. So step 2, we're just going to look at the step 2 menu, not necessarily the advanced menu. So you'll see in step 2, I have my model and my 5 sizes listed. So this is where I enter the quantity of sizes that I want to order. So I think in this particular exercise in the PDF I posted for everybody, this was the quantity I asked for. It was 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. And then lastly, down here in step 4, fabrics. So you'll see your fabric A is already here. This is not editable because you only entered one fabric in your model editor. So this came directly from your model editor. Okay. Your order name and your marker name automatically get filled when you change this, okay? So if I change this to test, you'll see down here, this changes my order and my marker name, okay? So that's why it's important to go ahead and make sure you have this set up first, okay? The next thing you're gonna do is enter your fabric width. So I gave you guys a fabric width of 52 inches, okay? Remember, this is cuttable width. So if you're measuring your fabric, you have to measure in from the selvage, okay? And that's it. Your length will get calculated as you lay your marker. So all you have to do now is save this, okay? When you save this, if you go back to your folder on the Z drive and click F5, it will refresh. You should now see a new file type that's called order, and it should be named the same thing as your marker with the fabric type at the end. If I had multiple fabrics within this style, I would get multiple orders and I would get multiple markers with different fabrics, okay? So now that this is done, I can choose process, okay? For today, just use process to practice. Eventually you can move to process view marker and it will open the marker in the marker making system. But I want you to kind of go through the process of seeing how to get to your marker. So do this, it'll say success, say okay, and you can close this now. Okay, and now if you come back here and click F5 again, you should now have a marker that is called LAL 2403A or your initials 2403A. Okay, So what we just did was create a new order and then processed it, and that automatically created a marker for us.